Hi everyone, my name is Thomas LaVoy, and I am the composer of the new Civil War Cantata that the Fort Myers Symphonic Mastersingers has commissioned and will be premiering in March of 2026. Very excited about this project. It's a pretty incredible story that we're going to tell. James Waxler, who was a cavalryman and an infantryman in the American Civil War fighting for the Union. It's a very timely piece of music, a very timely story considering a lot of the things that are happening in the world today. And I'm very excited to have the opportunity to create this work for you. As the composer, what is one thing you want the audience to take away after hearing your cantata? Or what impact do you hope this piece will have on the audience? Well, that's a big question. It's a very big question, and it's a big question because the subject is so huge. The Civil War, its importance not only in our country but in the world, it cannot be understated. But I think the thing that I want to get across with this, oftentimes we look at history and we see it very two-dimensional because we read it in a book, or we watch a movie of it, and we always have this kind of shade between us and the events. But that shade is really kind of contrived because we are all living the exact same story, and everything that we do now is informed and in fact brought about by the events of the past. And so what I want to do with this piece is to bring this incredible history and all of its myriad perspectives and events and characters and personalities and their decisions into the concert hall, to really bring it into where we are sitting and listening to it, and to give us a sense not only of what happened then, but how those things are still very relevant to us now, and how, yes, these things can happen in America, that considering the times in which we live, we are in danger of them happening again, and that it is our duty and our everything to try and avoid another situation like this, but also with an understanding that it had to happen. So again, huge question, big answer. It's a monumental task to get this thing composed, and but I'm feeling confident that it is going to at least ask a lot of questions, if not answer some of them. What was your first reaction when Matt approached you about the cantata, and what was your first reaction after reading the journal for the first time? Well, Matt and I kind of joke about this now because it was sort of funny. He sent me this very nice message that was sort of a little, not cagey about it, but a little bit reserved about this incredible thing that he was asking me about. He said, I've got this journal of my great-great-grandfather, and do you think there's something here? Like, could we make a piece out of this Civil War diary from a cavalryman with all these incredible events and everything? And I was like, Matt, yes, absolutely. Because for me, every time I've done one of these projects, these extended, historically driven works, it's always been, I have always had to chase it down, and I've had to work extraordinarily hard to not only come up with the idea, but to convince people that it's a good idea, and to find some way of funding it and making it happen. And here was somebody who, for the first time in my life, came to me and said, this is the idea. Can you do it? Do you have any interest in doing it? And the answer was obviously yes, of course. My first reaction to reading the journal for the first time, I was so excited at first when he told me about this project, and when we really started, once the commission was set and we had a contract in place, and I had read through the journal. I remember when I finished it and I just sat back and I was amazed. I mean, here was this guy in the 1880s who felt that it was necessary to put this down, to get these words down on the page for his children, his children's children, and ultimately for all of us. And to him, it must have felt very important and powerful. And then for many years, yes, it was important and powerful, but it was underneath a seal. And to have read his full story, to finish his full story, and to say, okay, now we got to make something out of this, it was extraordinarily daunting, but it was also deeply moving, and just what an opportunity. It's hard to even put it into words. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I have so much appreciation for Matt for trusting me to do this. What has been your approach to setting such intimate and historical words to music? Well, that has changed over time. At first, I thought I was only going to set the words of the diary itself. And then I had it in my head that I should incorporate some poetry from other sources to sort of comment on the action of the diary itself. And I've come up with a 3-tiered system for this piece that really is working well as I flesh out the libretto, because at this point I'm still putting together the sort of pillars of music. So there are going to be specific musical parts based on the major events of the diary. And then in between that, we'll have some sort of transitory music to glue everything together. But there are 3 things. The first of all is the diary itself. So the words of James Waxler. And those are primarily sung, not entirely, but primarily sung by the tenor soloist. The second, I am going to include some cut down versions of Walt Whitman's poetry. Walt Whitman was an extraordinary Civil War poet. He was not a soldier himself, but he did visit soldiers, and he did work in hospitals. So his poetry is just so stunning in its reflective nature of the Civil War and the times in which he lived. But the third thing I really, really struggled with, and that is the lack in the journal, the lack of the Black perspective. And not just in this journal, but in all Civil War journals. Maybe not all, but in many Civil War journals, and also in just general terms of the experience of slaves and the experience of former enslaved people. There are accounts of this, but by sort of definition, the slaves did not write as much as their white counterparts did. So we have this sort of hole in the experience of the Civil War, just naturally by the fact that the slaves were not able to write about it in as profuse amounts as white Americans were able to. And at first I was thinking, okay, well, I'm going to include other poetry by various other Black authors. But then I decided against that. And the reason I decided against that is that I want us to feel that emptiness. I want us to feel this kind of, that lack of the thing that we are fighting for. Because James Waxler, he was fighting for 2 things, and he says so in the journal: to preserve the Union and to free a large race of people from bondage. Those are literally his words. And because we have this emptiness, I'm not going to shy away from that. I've decided that I'm going to allow that emptiness to be there, but it is also going to be filled by music. And I'll talk about that in a moment as far as how the music is going to inform this emptiness, and how it's going to sort of represent the ghosts of so many people in the war, and also in the horrible institution of slavery. Any themes that stand out to you so far? Well, certainly, there's a lot about horses because he was a cavalryman. He has this beloved horse, Jim, and I won't ruin it for you what happens to Jim, but it is stunning in its heartbreaking nature and his love for this animal, and it is just very heartbreaking. And we forget sometimes, over 1 million horses and mules died during the Civil War, far outpacing the human toll. But it really gives us a window into things that we don't often see in Civil War literature, is this relationship with the animal that bears the rider. So that's a big thing, this sort of theme of horses. And horses, of course, in some cases are representative of freedom. So there's that as well. A theme that stands out to me as well, I don't know if this isn't necessarily a theme, but in history classes, at least for me growing up, the impression was always mostly that like Union good, Confederacy bad. And while the Confederacy was fighting for a horrible thing, a truly horrible thing, there is no doubt about the fact that a lot of the issues in terms of race relations also existed in the Union Army. In fact, the crux of this entire journal is the murder of an innocent slave girl, young girl, at the hands of a Union soldier. So it's one of these things where we often like to paint things as being black and white, and they're not. They're not. There's a lot of nuance, and there are things that were done on both sides during the war that were terrible. And the question is, which will be left unanswered. It's not even really going to be stated, but it'll be sort of there in the background the whole time. Of what justifies certain actions, what justifies the horrors of war, because I think the abolition of slavery is one of those, but it doesn't mean it's not a terrible, terrible cost to everyone involved. The other theme that I think I would mention is this idea that James Waxler was changed by war, and that he was not the same person going in as he was coming out. The journal was written in 1888, so it had the benefit of hindsight, but you could still tell the way that he writes at the beginning of the journal is very different from the way he writes at the end. He writes in a way that's very kind of excited and young, and he's going off to war, the soldier boy and everything. And by the end of it, he's really contemplating things that he sees. And again, the death of the slave girl is one of these moments where I think the full weight of the horror of slavery comes home to him. And it's an important moment because it shows us that change is good. Changing in your perspective as you learn more information is an important part of being a human. Sometimes I feel like people get pigeonholed and they're afraid to let go of their presuppositions. But when we witness things that are of that import, it's okay to say that this affected me. This is very important to my perspective on the world. So I think change is a really important thing, and change within a human being as they witness some of the toughest things that you can witness in life. Why do you think this project matters, and why now? Boy, if there was ever a piece to do right now, it's this one. I've thought about trying to hedge around this, and I've thought about trying to, toe the line a little bit better. But I can't. And I'm not trying to be sensationalist, but I do think that the possibility of a second American Civil War is very real right now. Sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, certainly. I think at any point in American history, from what I've studied, and admittedly I'm a composer, not a historian, but it does feel particularly tense at the moment. And I think the question that we have to ask through this piece is that same thing as identifying the costs of war. It's so important because you have to be sure that what you're going to war over is worth it. You really have to. And sometimes we look around the world and we wonder, we see a war elsewhere, and we wonder, is this really worth it? And it's not really for us to answer that. It's up to the people who are involved in it. And in the case of the Civil War, it was clear that it was worth it, especially in the outcome. It changed the course of history, not only in this country, but in the world. But I think we need to know what the costs of war are. It's an important thing to read about, and it's an important thing to study and to consume on a creative level, to know what it is we would be heading for if that eventuality were to come about. And how the obvious answer is we should really avoid it, because it's truly, truly horrible. It is terrible. Any small motifs or themes you want to share as a sneak peek? Well, this is a good opportunity for me to talk about something. I mentioned earlier in one of my other answers to these questions that one thing that has always kind of concerned me about this piece and about a lot of Civil War writing and Civil War creative work is the lack of, or at least relative lack of, a black perspective. And after all, we're fighting for the abolition of slavery, and yet there's this absence of what it actually meant to the slaves. Now, there are writings by escaped slaves, people who were alive at the time, black abolitionists, but the scope of it is just so much more limited than the huge amount, this huge balloon of information we have about the Civil War itself, the battles, things like that. So initially I was trying to sort of plug in texts by black poets and things like that, but I found that it always felt like I wasn't doing justice to it somehow. So the great thing about what we're doing here is that we have music. Music is an extraordinary tool because it can pick up where words leave off, where words don't do enough to tell us certain parts of the story. So I went through a lot of iterations of this, but essentially what I'm going to do is I have been studying the works of post-Civil War black composers. So composers who were alive in essentially the second half of the 19th century, who were either enslaved themselves and were freed or escaped, or whose parents were. And it's remarkable music. You start to see the very, very first roots of the entire 20th century of music being born and new explorations taking place. But what I'm doing is I'm taking these very small motives from a couple of composers that for some reason, for whatever reason within me as a composer, I find that they are this little core sort of DNA. And in my own mind, and in my own process, I call them the ghosts. And I know that probably doesn't make any sense, but I call them these ghosts because there's this sense throughout the whole piece so far, the piece that I'm composing. There's this sense that that there's this emptiness, this missing component, and it's going to be filled by these ghosts, these little tiny pieces of musical information that then get fleshed out into much larger things. Now, one of these is by Robert Nathaniel Dett, the great black composer. Phenomenal writing, and his piano works to me as a pianist have now been this enormous exploration. But he has in the Magnolia Suite, in the third movement, To My Lady Love, he has this very simple motive. And that motive gets developed throughout. Sometimes he misses a note. And then sometimes further on, it just changes keys. And so that sense of up, that little boom ba da bum, up a fifth, down a fourth, but then including a half step usually, is going to be integral to this piece. And not only that, but it started leading me into the sort of horse music, because there's going to be horse-related material in this. Fourths, oscillating. Imagine a tenor singing over this, parts of the journal. And that we start to build out this sort of texture of the passage of time and this sort of ride through the countryside of America and the creation of all these ghosts through war. And it's this big full circle and this interwoven tapestry of what the Civil War means and what it will eventually lead to. Because without slavery and without the Civil War, much of this music would have either not existed or would not be known. And that's how I'm bringing this black perspective is through this development of music written by black composers, but then sort of developed and woven into this narrative of James Waxler, who is fighting for their freedom, or the freedom of their brothers and sisters. So the second little tiny tidbit that I'm going to share is a very small, unexpected part of a piece by Thomas Wiggins. Thomas Wiggins was a Black composer who was active during the time of the Civil War, and who was extraordinarily taken advantage of as a slave, and was essentially turned into a money machine by his masters. He was blind, obviously, also potentially autistic, but he wrote some really beautiful music, really incredible music. And he has these little tiny moments, and one of them, he was writing, well past the Civil War as well, and of course the copyrights belong to his master John Bethune. But this one from 1882, there's this one little moment. It's in a part of a really fast run. But what I've done is there's something about this half note fall partway through. There's something about that just stuck inside my head, and I slowed it way down. It usually goes way faster than that. And it became more of this underpinning kind of nocturnal something that is going to feature in the piece. Just this sense of descent into further and further into this experience with the war that James Waxler has. It's just an incredible little moment, and there are so many like that. I've been studying a lot of music. Scott Joplin may make an appearance in a very shaded way, in a similar fashion to this. So this is kind of what I'm thinking in terms of the music, that there are these building blocks that are almost these sort of future ghosts. I mentioned ghosts. These future ghosts of what the events of that James Waxler was living, what that would lead to ultimately. This sort of echo from the future of the country that was made by the Civil War. So that's where I'm at. The piece is coming along. I have music written at this point. The libretto is very quickly taking shape. The drama is there. The music is starting to be there. We are well on the way. I hope you'll consider contributing to this. It's an important story to tell at this specific time. I'm so thankful to have this opportunity. Thank you to everyone at Fort Myers Symphonic Master Singers, and especially to Matt for trusting me to set his great-grandfather's words, which are truly incredible and heart-wrenching. And I'm just so excited to do this. So please consider contributing, and thank you very much.